Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you right here is the Remembering Bob Rosa coloring activity right here. And basically that you see right here is I would hand you right here in a pencil of like a little portrait image of Bob Rose. And basically that you see right here is that I went ahead and drew right here is like a little like this say sketch of of Bob, and as well as like the art kits that he was using. And basically that you have right here is like example right here of like a paint, it's like if you call it like a paint tub or paint tray that he was using, and as well as the paintbrush. And with the paintbrush, he probably had about maybe 3 or 4 different kinds right there. And then as well as right here's a picture. And I can remember that every about every weekend on a Saturday afternoon or evening that a lot of times he would come on, and he would it's like that would have been about nearly 20 years ago, I guess, from from whenever he was on last seen on TV. But I can remember that watching him and then thinking about, I'm like, that quite a few of his art, with the way he painted his work, and then just the way that he would do a number of types of artworks. And I could say that back in those days, back in like early 1995, that I can say that like if I would have brought a drawing like this maybe into the school for maybe show and tell, and like at the time I kept thinking about if you're going to bring something to school for like show and tell, and if anything it's going to be something that more likely that the kids would maybe like to see, and they more likely have the rules and about that, like if anybody has experience to where they would bring maybe a Barbie doll or maybe some sunflower seeds to school. But I if I can remember right, I think I brought a coloring book at least one time. But if I were to bring something like this to school those couple of years ago, and thinking that that I drew this by hand, and this is Bob Rose. He's my favorite show. It's like I watch his show a lot of times, and if anybody were to be watching those shows, if it was related to cooking or any carpentry type work or anything like that, I think about the number of shows that they could be watching, especially on a Saturday evening, to where that it's based on a TV show that you watch, especially on the weekends. Every weekend between the hours of 1 and 3 o'clock, that this person would come on, and they would actually talk about something and show you how it's done, and that type of stuff. And whenever I was a kid, I used to always think about, I'm like, really, how do you do that? And that knowing that, I'm like, for the things that he would be painting, and it looked quite pretty bit easy while he was working it. But then it seems like that a lot of times that whenever you look closely, it just seems like he's using a different kind of paper. Like the type of paper that he's using is not what you call the sketch paper. It's like the special material type paper. So it's like knowing about whenever you watch him paint something, and thinking that it's like he all you need is really a picture size at about 11 by 15 painting if it's called painting cloth or something like that, if a painting cloth paper, and he would actually paint a picture. And I just I drew this right here with pen, by the way, that I'm like, it's like a little example right here of like a little scenery. If this was right here is a scenery of like the mountains, and I'm sure that anybody who's tried drawing the mountains right here, if this was maybe the Rocky Mountain or the mountains in Utah or something like that, or maybe parts of Michigan or maybe California or somewhere like that, is thinking about how how to draw mountains. And I guess you say that it's more likely, it's going to require more than just what you call maybe a few strokes or something like that, sideways strokes, but or if it's going to be maybe a tab of the paintbrush or something like that. But you got right here, I can go ahead and maybe draw some trees on the top of the mountains too. But if we were to be trying to draw like mountains, that a few episodes that he has done with his paintings. And I can remember when I was a kid that a lot of times that I used to do a lot of stuff, by pencil marking. And I'm like, yeah, the type of pencil marking, and thinking that, yeah, that a number of times that I had messed up a couple of times and I would start over. But you have right here is like an example right here of like a sunset. I went ahead and include this like as if anybody wondered that. I'm like, you see it and then you like wondering. And the neat things that you can do when you're free-handed, to where no tracing and just think about getting some ideas just by looking at something and actually drawing it. But with this right here, I was not looking at no pictures from the outside. I was just like picturing them like, well, what do I think that this looks like? Just like if I were to be like, yeah, like you have right here is like a lake right here. And if anybody, I'm like, yeah, if anybody likes fishing or something like that, I'm like, I don't know, I can maybe is like, draw, somebody right there at the lake fishing. But, the different things that, I would see on this guy's show that, he would come on for about maybe, I would say for about half an hour, something like that. So he would come on for about half an hour talking about that, the tools that he was like, I'm gonna go ahead and use the brush, and then go ahead and use these colors here. And with these colors, that he would show that, if you were to actually mix them in, they would do different, work different colors. And one of them was like was the green. It's like he would paint a few strokes, say on this little paint pad, and then he would add as well as a little bit of purple as well. He would mix it in. So I can remember watching him on TV a lot of times, and I can remember that after the show that there would usually be a number you can call. It's like if you want to go ahead and check out more of this of Bob's, say coloring kits, or if it's anything you do for your own practice, call this number. And I can remember whenever I was young that I called the number one time, and nowadays I think you have to be at least 18 or older, just to call a few of those numbers. But let's just say that that one time that the person who answered said that hey, well, it's going to cost me, I think, yeah, it was about $49. It was going to cost about $49 just to get a kit. And thinking about that, since I'm going to college too, since I'm in art school, trying to work on my degree in art, that thinking about, exactly about knowing that of course, I don't know if Bob ever went to college. I don't know if he even knows really what Photoshop and all those other programs, that software programs are. But more likely he could probably say that if he did, then like say, yeah, like he would maybe be on it for maybe more than an hour or two, maybe more than 4 hours. If anybody knows between 3D animation and along with that, graph designing or anything like that, that it's something that more likely that could possibly keep somebody busy, almost all day. So it's like with Bob and along with me, to where that if you really liked your artwork to the point to where I'm like, you would more likely be on it all day. It was like, it was like if you want to call it a playground. It was like a something that like most people would get a lot of their entertainment by video games, but really, about if we were to do the doctor's research here, it is like, for some dermatologist, to where how good is it, for the thinking and then for the brain, to where whenever we do, paintings and then colorings. And of course, I listen to the radio a lot of times, and it's like knowing about, I'm like, for if it's going to be, doctors or pediatricians, to thinking about the stuff that gets your mind off of a lot of things. And with my artwork here is to where that whenever I do this type of artwork here, and thinking about that, well, go ahead and paint it or draw it, and then take it, to school and use it for like a show and tell type project. But I'm sure anybody probably say that, that if you were to take it to school, then you would have to make sure that you brought it back, home with you, or you back to the office, because they don't want anybody to take it, of course. But it was like, if I can remember right, I dealt with that too whenever I was in school, to where any of the artwork that people would, it's like if it looked very interesting to them, then maybe they would say that they borrowed it or something. But anyway, but talking right here is like, for Mr. for Rose, that for Bob Ross is like, he was one of my favorite artists, back whenever I was, whenever I was a kid, that I used to always think about, that looks very interesting. I'm like, looks like, and then by the time I try it, it was like, yeah, and I may have mentioned already about that I just, try to work on it and then just see what happens, which I did that too, to where that if I try to draw freehand and then a couple times I messed up and like, oh well, I'm just not good at this. But I could say that between like Sesame Street, the show like Sesame Street, and if it was Bob Ross, that whenever he came on TV, I can remember that I shared a TV, and the family TV, and whenever people want to go ahead and watch another show or something like that, for whatever reason, that the other people would say that, yep, that thinking that I'm like, yeah, anybody who's in art, especially anybody who's in art would like watch this. But there's something about the show, of course, to where that the way that the guy that did his artwork, to where that I'm like, yeah, made it pretty interesting, to where he would wash out the brushes and then he would use another instrument. I think another tool that I think he kept, I don't know if he kept it on his art board. I'll just go ahead and draw it as an example, like something that I know that carpenters use, like what's called one of these. I think that it's like the brush spread or something like that. The brush spread, it was like a metal type object that he would use for his paintings. So it was like that he would, to draw a cloud and then to draw the mountains and stuff, that he would actually use that, to go ahead and draw, for what he wants to draw on, for, I guess, for what he imagines. But I don't know exactly how he would do his artwork, but one of the ways I am assuming to where that he would actually, get an idea for whatever colors that he wanted to use, and then he would paint it's like if you want to go ahead and paint a cloud and maybe paint the manger, or if I paint the horse running manger, or he wanted to paint the river or the lake, or the mountains and then the shadows and stuff. So it was like that one, a lot of times, which it's like took me a while to figure it out too. A lot of times I kept thinking about which one do I want to draw first, just to make this look like an actual scenery, to where do I want to draw the mountains first, draw the river, and then draw the house. Of course, I drew the house first, but they say that I guess you can do it kind of either way, to where if you want to draw the clouds first, and then if you want to draw a tree right here or something. So the number of objects that you would maybe want to add to your painting too, that the way that he painted it, which I'm sure that I kept thinking about that, that a lot of the paint that I've used, that would smear, especially like maybe the watercolor, and a lot of times, like wondering about Ask Bob, it's like, well, that if I'm using watercolor, like, well, watercolor works also, but a lot of times, I guess there's a certain paint that I guess you got to use, just if it does smear, which I'm sure that he probably say that, yeah, it's. And then whenever it does smear, that sometimes you cannot erase it. It's like a lot of times you probably say that, yeah, that there are some artists that do tend to start over, or just do something else. It's like try to draw something else if they cannot erase their mistake or something. But on the other hand, that knowing that with this guy here, to where that at one time I think I did want to maybe bring him into the school, just for like a show and tell, and anybody, I say, even the teachers just say that yeah, well, if it became really interesting to them, and like thinking about, yeah, 20 years later, and knowing about who do you think that would be more likely be interested in bringing this in for show and tell? Anybody who just don't understand it, just like if we're trying to understand about how to work an iPhone 5 or maybe an iPod or something like that, anything that you don't quite understand, but then after you get some skills with it, and then, or you're introduced to it a little bit more, is thinking about, I'm like, yeah, exactly, about how did you learn how to tie your shoe? It's like, really, that I just had my frustrations. I don't know any kids, like if any kids were thinking about whenever they watch that TV show and thinking about, I'm like, yeah, whenever you watch this guy, paint his pictures, and thinking that, I'm like, yeah, that you'll go ahead and watch it, but then if you were to try it, but But I can remember that, whenever I was young, like I mentioned before, as to where that it was going to cost about maybe $50 or so just to buy one of his art kits. And then now that I think that you can buy it for a pretty decent price, for about maybe less than $20 at a store, depending on what kind you want. That they may say if you order it through the TV or order it from the company, then more likely it's possible it may cost a little bit more. But on your hand, that knowing that with me though, from how for how long I come to where with my artwork, to where that if I were to bring this into the class and be like for like show and tell, to where, hey, this is Bob Rose. It's like, oh yeah, he's let's just say if somebody were to use like maybe a famous character on TV or something like that, he was the voice actor for this person. So it's like knowing that anything that more likely that a kid would like to bring to school for show and tell. But I don't know if any kids have thought about bringing in a flashlight. If I can remember right, once or twice I have seen maybe board games, or if it was a flashlight or a comic book, or maybe glow in the dark pencil, something like that. So I say that being advised is like safety as well, to where it's like, yep, please bring something that's appropriate. But on your hand, that knowing about that with this drawing here, to where that whenever I would draw this, thinking that no erasable ink or nothing like that. And I kept thinking about, I don't know how well this is going to turn out, but for Bob Rose, so is that if we can all remember about a few of his shows that you may see them whenever you were to do an internet search, is thinking about with Bob Rose. So, Bob Rose, of course, from my understanding, I guess he did wind up passing away. So I guess if it was from leukemia or something, but I can remember watching him on TV those couple of times, and thinking about that that a lot of times he seemed like a real professional. But it's like nowadays with most kids' education, to where if it's going to be language arts, or if it's going to be maybe photography, or designing, or anything like that, anything that's related to the electronic programs, to where it's going to require a college degree. Which I don't know if Bob Rose had any kids, but let's just say that if they say that, knowing about if kids want to go ahead and get into this study, to where they want to maybe get into designing of the automobile industry, and then they want to know how to paint the advertisements for the latest models, or if it's maybe the latest computer programs or something like that, and being like, hey, that it requires a college degree, or it requires a degree with at least 10 years experience. So not only if it's going to be about maybe $50 or more, but let's just say that if it requires a certain degree. So some kids that may say that any career that we do look forward to where it seems like that there's something always stopping us, to where that you don't have what it takes to get into this career field. But on your hand, that the way I think about it, though, I guess it says keep it in mind, is thinking about you may, by next year you might just be surprised. But on your hand, the way I think about it, though, is like from what I learned from other programs, if it's going to be Art Alive or Mario Paint or some program like that, and just thinking about with my art skills, to where the way I feel about saying is, to where if you teach somebody else the basics about how to draw and how to paint something real realistic, and then get other people interested in it, I'm sure they say that it's like what I usually call, it's like if it's going to be the pot of gold, or for whenever I was young that I wanted to touch I wanted to touch a rainbow just to see. It's like really that what it was made out of. You see a rainbow somewhere, and then the kid would want to reach up and touch it. It's like it looked real interesting, just like the moon or the stars, glow in the dark stars, what you call it. But the way I think about it, though, is that with Bob Rose, is that remembering him from whenever he came on. If I can remember, he broadcast on Channel 9, so that would have been about back my hometown. I think that would have been about around the St. Louis area. But anyway, but you see right here is that you'll draw right here is that with Bob right here, and if this was right here was with a paintbrush. But thinking about, I'm like, really about, there are some artists that they may say that, yeah, that they didn't go to college, or maybe that they they did go to college, but then they only graduated with maybe about an associate's degree, or maybe that they did earn their bachelor's or something. But I don't know. I keep warning about that. People who were born between 1949 and maybe 1957, something like that, to where that at the time, to where that that they are like, well, either you don't need a college degree, just to get into this. And to just to broadcast on TV, just to show people about what you're good at and what you can do. But then on the other hand too, there may be some kids and some students who say that adults, to where that they choose to where they want to work on our goals, to aim for the best, so far as any of our other kids, to where that anything that we think that we want to do is to where that there may be some things that may not be required right now, but then a student may say that, hey, I want to aim for the best. So I guess that's usually to where that some kids would probably say that they want to work hard and aim for the best for what they can do. So I guess if there's any arguments about that, to where if parents will probably think that well, for some things in life that you just got to maybe accept or something, but on the other hand, that the way I think about it, though, is really, can we really get through life, get to our careers thinking about that, yeah, that there's between a positive and negative attitude towards something about that, for anything that we do, to where something that we watch on TV, or any talents that more likely we do have, to where that, thinking about, I'm like, back then, it's like, $50 was a lot of money. So thinking about, yeah, a lot of things are expensive too, but on the other hand, the way I think about it, though, is that really the show and tell type project right here is basically showing right here is that knowing for that, if I say guess what time it is, it's like almost 2 o'clock here on Saturday evening, and thinking about, I'm like, yeah, the guy's show would come on for about at least a half an hour, and wondering about, yeah, what all have you learned today or something. And I can remember that he would also sign, if I can remember, it was with the paintbrush, if I can remember right. So it was like, yeah, he would usually sign something like, Bob, Bob Rose, like this right here. I'm like, that he would see Bob Rose. So I'm like, yeah, that the way he would sign, they do like a signature, kind of like that, to where I'm like, would say most artists that they would have, like a signature kind of like that. Let's say for Bob Rose, but he would actually write that the name, and of course location, but he would also mention about yeah, after he paint a picture, and thinking about hey, that you got the clouds, and then you got the trees, and then the lake right there, and he would also paint, it's like a house. It's like you all think about living here. Oh, I think I would like to live here. So he would paint like a little house. And this is all pen, by the way, but I'm just draw an example right here, to where if this was a house, and if it was like a cabin, I'm like, if he would paint a cabin right in there, and then with the land, and then as well as like if with the trees and stuff, with the landscaping, and a number of things. So it's like they say, I'm like, it's not just about the measuring either, but I'm sure it's not that difficult, as to where that you just allow your mind to focus on the work, to where allow to give your mind freedom, to where that if you're trying to do something, allow you to concentrate on what you're trying to do. But and I'm sure that they say that you anybody will more likely understand a little bit more, is like you say, is like, yep, just get used to it, to just understand about how it works, and then the skills. But I don't know, I'm like, you're like wondering if Bob Rose, was he ever good at math? I'm like, because I'm sure that they say that there are some paintings that maybe require a certain size in math, to where that I'm like, yeah, and then mixing the colors too. It's like knowing that that you got the color wheel, the basic color wheel. Whenever I was in art class, I can remember that the basic color wheel was like if you mix, I think, brown with green or something like that. I think orange or something like that. Type of orange color. But whenever you mix colors together, that I guess to say it kind of transforms the color to like a lighter or darker color. If we were to do the study about this and thinking about it, especially with the sunset, to where if we want to try to draw the sunset right there. If anybody wonders, I'm like, yeah, are you going to add any color to the painting here? But just use marker right here for right now, and then you've got right there is like a example right there of the sunset. And go ahead and use a little bit of yellow as well. I usually color it like with yellow and red, but knowing about with Bob though that he would have a lot of times he would use only about maybe 3 or 4 different colors to do his artwork. So it was like do his paintings, and he would mix a few colors too, and sometimes he would just say dab this, or it's like he would use the paintbrush, and then he would use another type of tool, and then he would have like he would wash a brush, he would wash out the brush, and you got right here is the paint stand right there. But anyway, but talking about there, this was all worked right here with the markers and crayons, as well as with the pen. So anybody wonders, it's like yeah, with Bob though, he mainly used the paints. He may use the 4 colors and paints, but yeah, I really don't know. As they say, there's really a limit for how many art supplies. I'm like, I can remember whenever I started out with it was mainly with the pen and with the ruler too, and along with drawing paper. But there may be some that may say that they actually started maybe by with trace paper, or maybe with the coloring book. So we may think that coloring is just for kids, but on your hand, that the way I think about it though is really can coloring and paintings and other types of arts, if it's going to be sculptures or maybe ceramic type work, really could that really be for anybody? I say yeah, that you could be in your 40s and 50s and still say that it's nice. It's nice to have, because just like singing, or just like music, playing the guitar and thinking about, I'm like, yeah, any talents and good skills that you do have, just like introduce that to somebody else, and as well as the things that you can do. It's like knowing that it's basically that they think that that may start out as a hobby, but you might be surprised about for how well it turns out. But on your hand too, talk about right here is to have a safe for remembering. Say Bob Ross, you got remembering Bob Ross is like to say color activity.